When I first moved onto Willow Ridge Lane, I thought I'd reached the good part of adulthood. I was 31, engaged to Marlene, and finally neighbors with my best friend, Liam Carter. We'd been inseparable since middle school, the kind of idiots who built bike ramps out of plywood and poor judgment. Growing up, we always joked about living next door someday. Somehow, life let it happen. My house sat across from a wall of pine forest. Liam sat one door down, facing an abandoned rental with peeling paint and curtains that never moved. The realtor said it had been vacant for months. I believed her. Nothing about that house felt lived in. 2 weeks after we settled in, I noticed something strange. Every night at 1:13 a.m., a faint light flickered in the rental's upstairs window. Not a lamp, more like someone flicking a lighter on and off. When I pointed it out, Liam shrugged. My old apartment had weirder crap. Someone used to leave Polaroids under my door. He said it straight-faced. Not a joke. I didn't ask more. I didn't want to feed my own fear, the leftover paranoia from growing up with an overprotective mom who always believed someone was watching. But things changed the night I heard gravel crunching outside. I checked the window and saw a tall, hooded figure standing at Liam's mailbox, motionless, facing his dark house. I called him immediately. "Someone's outside," I whispered. Liam checked his doorbell cam. "Static. Signal's jammed," he muttered. "That's not normal." The next morning, I found something on my porch, a smooth river stone with the word "saw" etched into it. I told Liam. He went pale and said he found one 2 weeks earlier that said, "heard." We laughed it off, but neither of us really believed it was a joke. By May, nights on Willow Ridge Lane felt heavier. Liam started hearing footsteps outside his bedroom window, soft, slow, like someone pacing through the pine needles. One night after we'd finished gaming, he muted the TV suddenly. "Evan, someone's out there." We checked. Nothing but trees. Still, when he walked me home, he kept glancing behind us like something was trailing him. Then the 1:13 a.m. light began appearing twice a night. Always the same window, always the same flicker. I told myself it had to be kids, vandalism, something harmless, but the house had no power. In early June, everything escalated. At almost midnight, Liam pounded on my door, shaking. "Someone was in my backyard," he said. I saw a camera flash behind the pines. We checked together. Dirt under his rear windows was disturbed. Pine needles displaced in circular patterns. Fresh shoe prints. I shined my light toward the abandoned rental. A silhouette stood in the upstairs window, still, watching us. "Did you see that?" I whispered. Liam nodded. "He's been there before." My stomach nodded. "What do you mean?" "Before?" He sat at his kitchen table, hands trembling. "I didn't tell you everything," he said. "Back in my old apartment, someone took pictures of me sleeping. They showed up in my mailbox, sometimes under my door. And you think this is connected?" "I don't know," he whispered. "But someone's been leaving things for me here too." That was the moment I realized we weren't imagining anything. Someone was watching us. A week later, I woke to 3 taps on the living room window. Not random, rhythmic. Marlene grabbed my arm. "Evan, someone's outside." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Liam. 3 knocks, it read. I checked the yard. Nothing. But Marlene swore she saw a phone screen glow from the bushes. We called the police. The officer barely cared. "Probably teenagers messing around," he said. The next night proved otherwise. At 2:04 a.m., a message lit up my phone. Unknown number. "Nice photo, Evan." The attached picture froze me. It was me and Marlene asleep, taken from outside our bedroom window. I called Liam. He answered breathlessly. "I got one too," he said. "Me on my couch. Someone took it from my window." We ran to each other's houses like 2 terrified kids. Across the street, the abandoned rental's window was wide open. A camera flash flickered once. We grabbed essentials and drove to a motel. Neither of us slept. By morning, police searched the rental. Someone had been living there. Sleeping bag, wrappers, stolen mail, a camera, sketches of the neighborhood, pages devoted to me and Liam, angles of our windows, notes on our routines. But whoever lived there was gone. Footprints led into the woods and stopped. We moved out within weeks. Willow Ridge Lane went from dream to nightmare overnight. Liam found a rental in Riverton. Marlene and I moved to a townhouse 2 counties over. Still, I kept blinds shut, checked locks 4 times a night. Fear isn't logical, it just sticks. 2 months later, Liam received an unmarked envelope at his new place. Inside was a Polaroid. Willow Ridge Lane. Houses empty. Sky overcast. Taken recently. On the back. Faint ink. Followed. He called me instantly. I didn't answer, not because I ignored him, but because I couldn't. I was standing frozen in my hallway, phone in hand, staring at my own front window. A silhouette stood outside, tall, still, watching. Fear changes you. After that night, I slept in the downstairs guest room, where the only window faced the driveway. Marlene kept saying we were safe, but I'd already learned the hard truth. Safety is something you feel until someone takes it away. The next morning, a small object lay on my doorstep, another river stone, this one etched with a single word. Soon, I drove to Liam's place shaking. He looked worse than I'd ever seen him. "It's him," he said. Same handwriting. We filed another report. Nothing came of it. No suspect, no leads. For a while, things went quiet. Then, one night, Liam called me. I answered immediately. "Liam?" Silence. Then a faint click. A camera shutter. Then breathing. The call ended. I drove to his house. His lights were on, TV running, mug on the counter, but Liam was gone. The back door was cracked open. Footprints led into the woods. They disappeared 50 feet in. He was never found. I moved again. Out of state this time, but every few months, something arrives in my mailbox. A Polaroid. Sometimes it's of my new house. Sometimes of Liam's old one. Sometimes of the woods where he vanished. The most recent one showed my driveway at night. On the back, the familiar ink. Not done. That same night, at exactly 1:13 a.m., I saw it again through the blinds. A faint flicker in the dark, a lighter flame, opening, closing, waiting. Listen to your instincts. The dangers we ignore, the small warnings, the uneasy moments are often the ones that grow teeth. Your fear may not always be right, but it's never meaningless. Before everything unraveled that October night, my life felt split into two parts. Who I was before Denver, and who I became after it. Liam Dorsey and I had been friends since we were kids in Ridgepoint, Colorado. We did everything together, crashed bikes, climbed trees, dared each other into places we shouldn't have been. Our friendship felt unbreakable. But 2 months before the night I'm about to tell you, we were cutting through an alley in Denver when we walked in on a guy breaking into a car. He turned toward us, a black mask covering half his face, and stared like he wasn't surprised to see us at all. Like he'd been expecting witnesses. The police came, but by then he was gone. For weeks afterward, I felt like someone was watching me on the bus, in crowds, even through my apartment window. Liam chalked it up to paranoia, which only pushed us apart. That distance was why we planned the hiking trip to reset things. But the rain ruined the route, and by the time we gave up and turned back, we were cold, soaked, and barely speaking. We cut through the Ridgepoint Trail for a shortcut. Locals always talked around that place like it was a bruise you shouldn't press, but growing up near it made us dismiss the stories. By the time we reached Liam's rented cabin, 211 Ridgepoint Lookout, it was close to midnight. The place sat alone at the tree line, lightless except for the lantern Liam pulled from the shelf. Inside, the heater was busted and the air felt colder than it should have. We stripped off our wet socks and tried to warm our hands over the lantern light. "This is what we get for trying to be outdoorsy," Liam said. I managed a weak smile. But something had been gnawing at me ever since we left the trail. "I think someone followed us," I said. Liam groaned. "Don't start." I saw a figure behind us, tall, hooded. You saw rain and trees. Before I could answer, lightning flashed, and for half a second, we both saw a shape behind the fogged kitchen window. Still, upright, watching. The next flash showed nothing. Neither of us mentioned it, but neither of us forgot it, either. We tried pretending nerves were getting to us. The storm made the cabin shake and the lantern flicker, and for a while we just sat quietly, listening to the wind scrape the walls. Then the power flickered on for a single second, long enough to light the room, long enough to show a muddy boot print inside the back door. "Please tell me that's yours," Liam said. "It's not. Evan, seriously." I didn't go near the back door. The print was fresh, water still gathered in its grooves. Before we could argue more, a heavy thud hit the roof, then another. Slow, steady, not an animal jumping, someone walking. Liam grabbed the fire poker. I picked up the lantern, though my hands trembled so hard the beam shook across the walls. "I'm going outside," Liam said. "You're insane. It might be a tree branch." or something loose on the roof. You heard those steps. He didn't deny it. He just went for the door. The wind hit us so hard it felt like walking through needles. Rain soaked us instantly. We circled the cabin, mud pulling at our feet. Thunder rolled across the ridge. Lightning flashed. A man crouched behind the woodshed, part of his face showing pale and expressionless, watching us. The next flash, he was gone. We rushed behind the shed. Nothing. Only footprints leading into the trees, and stopping abruptly as if he'd stepped onto air. That was enough. We ran back inside and blocked the door with the couch and table. Liam called the sheriff, who told us they'd send a deputy when the storm eased. Hours, probably. We sat on the floor with the lantern between us, breaths visible in the cold. Something brushed the cabin walls, dragging slowly from one corner to the next. Same height, I whispered. Same build as the guy in Denver. Liam didn't answer. But fear had finally reached his eyes. The storm kept pounding the cabin, and the noises outside only got stranger scrapes, taps, faint shifting like someone circling the place. The lantern flickered, making the shadows jump around us. Every now and then, Liam crept to the window and peeked out. I refused. I'd already seen enough for one lifetime. Then came the tapping. 3 soft taps against the window behind us, deliberate, patient. Liam rotated the lantern just enough to cut the glare on the glass. A face stared back from inches away. Expressionless, pale, eyes locked on us. I fell backward, knocking over the lantern. The room plunged into darkness. "Get it lit," I shouted. Liam managed to spark it back on, but the window was empty again. "He's messing with us," Liam whispered. "Why?" "I don't want to know." We sat back to back again, the lantern between us like a tiny shield. Hours crawled by. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that face, the blankness in it, the cold calm. Around 4 a.m, a knock came at the door. Soft, slow. We stayed quiet. Another knock, then a voice. Low, male, calm, close enough to sound like it was right against the wood. "Evan." Liam's eyes snapped to mine. I felt the blood drain from my body. He knew my name. We didn't sleep. Somehow, the knock stopped, and the storm died down. Dawn crept through the windows without warning, pale and quiet. The nightmare didn't disappear with the daylight, but it faded just enough for us to breathe again. 2 deputies arrived shortly after sunrise. They looked around the cabin with cautious eyes, checking the walls, the roof, the surrounding mud. Nothing. No footprints, no signs of forced entry, no marks on the wall where we'd heard scraping. Not even the boot print inside remained. But behind the woodshed, snagged on a nail, they found a piece of black fabric, smooth, thin, not from outdoor clothing, not anything either of us recognized. "Mask material," one deputy muttered. They bagged it. We told the sheriff everything, how the man watched us, how he vanished, how he said my name. She listened, but her expression stayed unreadable. "Storms can distort things," she said. "People get rattled." "Are you saying we imagine someone calling my name?" I asked. "I'm saying the mind fills gaps when stressed." Liam stepped forward. "We know what we saw." She didn't argue. "Regardless, whoever it was is gone. Head back to Denver. Keep your doors locked for a few days." That was it. We packed and left within minutes. Neither of us looked back at the cabin, but the feeling of being watched didn't leave my head. Even as the mountains shrank behind us and city roads replaced forest paths, I kept glancing in the mirrors. No one followed, but the silence felt like the pause between breaths. Life didn't return to normal. Not for me, maybe not for Liam either. We hung out more often after the cabin, but our conversations were different, shorter, tighter, like both of us were trying not to step on the feeling that something had followed us. Some nights, I woke certain I heard footsteps on the roof again. Not running, not pacing, just slow, heavy steps too steady to be branches or animals. At first I tried to dismiss it, but after a week of hearing it off and on, I called Liam. "Do you hear anything at night?" I asked. He hesitated just long enough to feel real. "Yeah. On the roof." So it wasn't just me. We stopped talking about Denver altogether, about the break-in, about the man in the woods. Avoiding the subject didn't fix anything, but neither of us could push ourselves back into that fear. We just stayed close, movies, takeout, bike rides like we used to, but nothing felt as easy as before. One evening, after we got coffee, Liam said something that stuck with me. "What if Denver had nothing to do with it?" he said. "What if that guy wasn't the thief? What if he wasn't following us at all? Then who was he? I asked. Liam shook his head. Maybe someone who lives off those trails. Someone who noticed us, not because of Denver, but because we walked where we shouldn't have. The idea chilled me more than the alternative, because if the man wasn't tied to the past, then he wasn't done. He wasn't finished with anything. He was just out there, waiting. The last time Liam and I met up, we promised to call each other whenever we heard anything strange. No questions, no judgment, whatever that was, Liam said. We're not dealing with it alone. I nodded. It was the only promise that made me feel slightly safer. But even now, months later, I still sleep lightly. I still freeze when thunder rolls in, remembering the slow footsteps crossing the roof. I still check my windows when the wind gets too quiet. The morning after the cabin, I wanted to believe the sheriff that stress and darkness twisted what we thought we saw. But the face at the window was real. The voice saying my name was real, and the feeling that someone is still out there, moving quietly through the places where the world turns dark, that's real too, and I don't think he ever stopped watching. Most people outgrow childhood fears. I didn't. When I was 14, someone tried breaking into our house during a winter storm. I heard the back door jolt like someone was throwing their shoulder into it. When I looked through the fogged glass, I saw a silhouette tall, unmoving, facing me. The adults dismissed it, police found nothing, and life went on. But a fear stayed with me, quiet and stubborn. I checked locks every night. I slept lightly, and only my best friend Caleb believed me. By September of my senior year, that fear had faded but never really left. So when my parents left for a 3-day hiking trip, leaving me and my sister Lena home alone, the house felt bigger than usual. Lena was 19, usually gone, and I knew I'd essentially be by myself. Maybe that's why I wanted people around. I planned a small cross-country team hangout, 15 friends, maybe, a movie in the backyard, snacks, nothing crazy, but high school news spreads fast. By 9 o'clock, nearly 60 kids were in my yard, spilling into the living room, kitchen, and hallway. The problem was our location. Our house backed up to an abandoned botanical research lot, a fenced-off property full of overgrown brush and old sheds. Homeless activity had been reported there over the summer. Police had warned us twice. Most people ignored it. Caleb didn't. Dude, this is exactly the place not to throw a huge party, he said, watching unfamiliar faces walk in. It's fine, I told him, trying to believe it. I just wanted one night where I didn't feel paranoid, but I kept noticing people I didn't recognize near the back gate. Twice, someone jiggled the basement door. Something in the air felt off, like the house, my house, wasn't under my control anymore. Then fog started rolling in from behind the fence, thick enough to swallow the backyard lights. The crowd moved inside, and every old fear I'd buried started scratching back up. Around midnight, the party was loud enough to shake the floors, but I felt uneasy. Caleb found me in the kitchen looking tense. Someone tried the basement door again, he said. Not a student. Older guy. I didn't know what to say. My stomach sank. Minutes later, someone yelled from the laundry room. On the tile floor were 2 muddy footprints, big, clear, headed toward the back of the house. Not one person at the party had shoes that muddy. The noise died a little after that. Kids still talked and laughed, but something in the house had shifted. You could feel it. By 1:30, people began drifting off. Cars pulled away, headlights sweeping across the fog. By 2, the house was nearly empty. Just me and Caleb cleaning cups off tables. And then came silence, sharp and sudden. Lena still hadn't come home. I went upstairs to wash my hands. That's when I heard it, a dragging sound from above the ceiling. Slow, rough. I held my breath. Then came a heavy thump, strong enough to vibrate the vent. Caleb ran to the bottom of the stairs. You heard that, right? It came from the attic. Neither of us moved at first. The attic was the part of the house we avoided. Cold, cluttered, barely used. I'd only checked it once since the storm night years earlier, and I remembered thinking I'd seen something shift up there. I'd convinced myself it was nerves, but now the dragging turned into steady footsteps. Caleb swallowed hard. Please tell me that's an animal. It's not, I whispered. I pulled the attic ladder's cord. The wooden steps unfolded with a long creak. The footsteps stopped immediately. Be careful, Caleb said, voice tight, but I climbed anyway. The attic light flickered when I entered. The air smelled like damp clothes and dirt, and for a second I wondered if something had crawled in through the roof. But the moment I saw the boxes, my skin prickled. Everything had been rearranged. Boxes pushed into narrow paths, stuff stacked like makeshift walls. My family didn't organize anything up here, not like this. Caleb hovered halfway up the ladder. Dude, someone's been living here. I moved deeper into the aisle. Something brushed behind a box. I turned just as a tall stack toppled over, books and old decorations scattering across the floor. A man crouched behind the fallen boxes. He stared at me with wide, alert eyes, his face dirty, his clothes layered and torn. He looked like he'd been hiding for days, maybe longer. But there was nothing confused or lost in his expression. He looked like he'd been waiting. Before I could move, another sound came from the far corner, someone else shifting. "There's two," I whispered. The crouched man rose slightly. That broke whatever freeze held me. I backed up fast, nearly tripping, and climbed down the ladder in seconds. "Go!" I shouted. We slammed the attic door shut. Footsteps pounded above us, fast, erratic, too heavy to be an animal. We ran into my room and shoved the dresser against the door. Caleb fumbled for his phone. My hands shook so hard I could barely think straight. The night I'd seen the silhouette suddenly didn't feel like a childhood exaggeration. It felt like a beginning. The police arrived quickly, faster than I expected at 2 in the morning. Flashing lights cut through the fog outside. Officers entered quietly, barely speaking as they cleared the downstairs with their guns drawn. We listened from my room as they climbed the stairs, then the ladder. There was shouting. Something slammed, maybe a box, maybe a person. Then silence. An officer called out, "You can come out now." My legs felt hollow, but we stepped into the hallway. 2 officers descended with 2 handcuffed men, grimy, exhausted, anxious. Their clothes were layered with dirt and insulation fibers. One wouldn't look at us. The other stared with cold detachment. "They came in during the party," an officer said. "Your basement latch has signs of force. Looks like they used the crowd as cover." My mouth went dry. He added, "The attic's been used recently. More than one night." Caleb's eyes widened. "They were living up there?" "Looks that way." Lena burst through the front door minutes later, shocked and apologizing. She had no idea any of this had happened. I barely heard her. My eyes kept drifting toward the attic door, hanging open like a wound in the ceiling. One officer pulled me aside. "Those footprints in the laundry room? Definitely not from your friends." I nodded, unable to speak. The longer the officers stayed, the more the house felt wrong, like something had been peeled back that we couldn't cover again. When everyone finally left, dawn was beginning to lighten the sky. The normal sounds of morning didn't comfort me. They made the night feel even more real. Caleb stood on the curb beside me. "You okay?" "No," I said honestly. He hesitated. "You don't think this ties back to, that storm night?" I didn't want to answer, but the thought had already been circling my head. The silhouette, the door shaking, the unexplainable feeling I'd carried for years. All of it felt connected now. Caleb headed home. I walked inside, the house quiet again. Too quiet. I went to my room to fix the dresser we'd shoved earlier. My sheets were still scattered from when we barricaded the door. Picking them up, I saw something that stopped me cold. A single footprint, inside my closet, smaller than the prints in the laundry room. Narrow, fresh. It hadn't been there earlier, and the police hadn't checked inside the closet at all. Someone else had been in the house. Someone the officers didn't find. I shut the closet slowly, my hands trembling. Every instinct inside me screamed that the house wasn't empty even with the men gone. That feeling I'd had at 14, the one everyone dismissed, was back in full force. I looked out my window toward the abandoned lot. The fog was thinning, revealing the uneven ground and broken fence line. A faint trail of flattened grass led toward a gap in the fence. Something or someone had come through there. The 2 men had been caught. But the footprint in my closet didn't match either of them, which meant whoever made it was still out there. Maybe in the lot, maybe somewhere else, maybe planning to come back. My house felt unfamiliar, like someone had rearranged the air itself. Even the morning light couldn't push away the feeling that someone had once again been watching me. Some fears never leave because they're not baseless. Sometimes they're warnings, echoes of something real, something that waits for the right moment, the right distraction, the right quiet night. And as I stood there staring at the closet door, I realized the worst part wasn't what had happened. It was the dread that it wasn't over, because danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it slips in unnoticed. Sometimes it hides, Sometimes it watches, and sometimes it never really leaves. Listen to your instincts, even when others dismiss them. Fear can be a signal, not a flaw, and taking it seriously may protect you long before danger becomes visible. I used to think fear was something people outgrew, like losing your baby teeth or quitting summer camp. When I was a kid, adults always told me Fairview Bluff was the kind of place nothing bad could happen. Our police blotter was mostly lost dogs and noise complaints. People left their cars unlocked at the grocery store, and neighbors watered each other's lawns when someone was out of town. But when I was 8, all that certainty cracked. I watched a man slip under the river's surface right in front of me, his arms flailing like he was reaching for something he'd never touch again. I stood there frozen on the rocks, my voice buried somewhere under my ribs, too terrified to call for help. By the time someone else saw him, it was too late. For years, I held that guilt like a secret bruise. The water in Fairview Bluff never looked the same again. Only Ethan Burke ever knew the truth about that day. Ethan, who lived 3 streets over and acted like fear was a myth people invented to keep themselves from doing fun things. Growing up, he was the kid who biked down the steepest hill, jumped from the highest tree branch, and prank called the sheriff's office just to hear the dispatcher get annoyed. He was everything I wasn't. Maybe that's why we stuck to each other like glue. But the fall we turned 15, something in him shifted. He'd show up to school with bruises he waved off as roughhousing. He was quieter. Sometimes, during lunch, I'd catch him staring at his hands like he wasn't sure they were his. I didn't push him about it. When someone like Ethan starts acting fragile, the last thing you do is point it out. So when he asked me no, begged me to come with him to a sleepover at the Gale brothers' place on Eldershaw Hill, I agreed. I didn't want to. Nobody wanted to go near that house. Kids talked about it the way people talk about haunted mines or abandoned hospitals. The Gales kept their curtains shut even in the brightest months of summer. Their dad worked nights, slept days, and was rumored to have once thrown a drunk out the bar window downtown. Nobody had proof, but in a small town, rumors grow legs fast. Still, Ethan insisted. And when your closest friend looks like he's unraveling thread by thread, you follow him whether it makes sense or not. The road up Eldershaw Hill always felt too narrow, like it was squeezing cars as they passed. The air cooled the higher we climbed, and the houses thinned until only the Gale place remained at the end. From the outside, it looked like the kind of house tornado hunters tested equipment on peeling siding, a sagging porch, windows clouded with grime. The porch bulb was dead. Rusty Gale, the older brother, opened the door before we could knock. He had a stitched scar running along his jawline like someone had zipped his skin back together. Marlon, the younger one, hovered behind him, shifting his weight from foot to foot like he had somewhere better to be. Inside, the house smelled like cold metal and wet basement. The TV in the living room played static, though the cable box wasn't even on. A cuckoo clock on the wall ticked too loudly, every second punching the silence. Rusty gave us a thin smile and said his dad was out working late. Marlon told us to drop our backpacks anywhere, but sounded like he didn't want us touching anything. For the first hour, things felt normal enough. Cards, soda, bad jokes. But something was off beneath the surface. Ethan barely spoke. His hands trembled when he brought his soda to his mouth. Once, I caught him staring down the hallway with a look I recognized too well, fear disguised as concentration. And every 30 minutes or so, Marlon disappeared upstairs. When he returned, his hands were freshly wiped on his jeans, like he had touched something dirty. We were pretending to have fun when Rusty asked if we wanted to see something their dad left behind. The air seemed to thin. Ethan's knee hit mine under the table, a small, nervous tap. My chest tightened, though I didn't know why. Rusty led us to a back room, one that didn't match the rest of the house. The wallpaper peeled like old sunburn. A metal cabinet was bolted to the floor. Inside were objects that didn't belong in a normal family home. A cracked Polaroid camera, a broken hunting scope stained with reddish-brown, animal collars with no tags, lengths of chain that rattled when they moved. None of it felt right. Rusty didn't explain a single item. Marlon just watched us with those restless eyes, waiting for our reactions like he was studying us. Before I could ask questions, Marlon shoved a VHS tape into an old player. The screen flickered to life. Grainy footage of their backyard appeared. The camera pointed at a shed. Inside the shed, Something struggled, banging, scraping, gasping like an animal trying to claw its way out. A whisper from behind the camera said, "Not yet, let it learn." The room went still. I felt the old fear. I hated the river, the drowning man, the helplessness rise up again. Ethan's hand found my wrist. He squeezed once, hard. A dog started barking in the backyard, fast, frantic, panicked. Rusty's face tightened. He locked the back door and turned toward us. "Dad taught us how to keep things under control," he said. I didn't breathe. Neither did Ethan. Rusty pulled out something wrapped in cloth. When he unwrapped it, the breath I'd been holding slipped out in a broken gasp. It was a bolt gun. Loaded. The kind farmers used to put down livestock. Rusty pointed it at me first, then at Ethan, laughing each time we flinched. Marlon leaned in, whispering, "What if he slips?" Rusty smiled. "Then we see what happens." Ethan leaned close to me. His voice shook. "I know how to distract them. When I say go, run. Don't stop this time." I hated the words. Hated that he knew exactly where my weakness lived. But there was no time to argue. Ethan grabbed the static-filled TV and smashed it onto the floor. Rusty jerked in surprise. The bolt gun swung wide. I didn't think. I ran. The first shot fired into the wall, inches from my arm. Wood chips stung my skin as I tore through the hallway. Past the kitchen, toward the side window. I shoved it up, squeezed through, ripped my jacket, fell into the cold November dirt. Behind me, Ethan shouted my name. Then another sound, something heavy hitting the floor inside. I wanted to go back. I wanted to be brave, but my legs made the decision without me, pounding down the hill as if the whole world were on my heels. Every shadow looked like Rusty. Every wind gust sounded like footsteps. When I reached home, I collapsed on the porch, screaming for my mother. She came running outside, robe flapping, eyes confused and terrified. I told them everything. My father didn't hesitate. He called the sheriff right away. The next morning, police raided the Gale house. They found the bolt gun, the tapes, the metal cabinet, and several locked cages in the shed, empty but stained. The Gale brothers were arrested. Their father was gone. Ethan was found hiding behind the shed, shaking, but alive. The house on Eldershaw Hill was condemned before winter ended. But even now, years later, I can't pass that hill without feeling watched. Like the memory hasn't finished with me yet. Trust your instincts, speak up when something feels wrong, and never ignore the quiet suffering of the people you care about. Fear grows strongest in silence, but courage begins the moment you tell the truth. I learned early that safety is often an illusion, something you believe in because you need to, not because it's real. Maybe that's why Mila and I clung to each other for so many years. We met in high school, two quiet girls sitting in the back of an art room full of louder, brighter people. She drew with frantic, emotional lines. I drew with small, controlled strokes, but we recognized the same heaviness in each other, the same instinct to hide the mess at home behind jokes or sarcasm. By the time we were adults, our friendship had survived broken families, toxic relationships, and the loneliness that comes from never feeling fully rooted anywhere. When I moved into a small townhouse in Seattle for my animation job, I gave her a spare key, just in case you ever need a place to crash, I'd said. It felt like the right thing to do for someone who had spent most of her life bouncing between uncertain living situations. I didn't realize she would take that as permission to slip into my life in ways I never imagined. It started with small things, my sketchbook slightly out of place, closet doors left open when I always closed them, my cat refusing to walk down the hallway at night. I brushed it off as stress from deadlines. Remote work blurred day and night. I wasn't sleeping well. I lost track of where I left things, but it wasn't stress. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was someone else's presence blending into my routines so subtly that, at first, I didn't see it at all. The truth didn't hit me until the week I flew to Los Angeles for a studio meeting and asked Mila to house sit. She agreed too quickly, with a cheerfulness that felt out of place. But I told myself I was overthinking. This was Mila, my best friend, my almost sister. On the second night of my trip, I got notifications from my security app. Bedroom window sensor disabled. Twice. I texted Mila, and she brushed it off. Probably bumped it while cleaning, she said. Mila didn't clean. Ever. The uneasiness stayed with me until the moment I walked into my house 2 days later. The first thing I noticed was the smell, Mila's perfume. Too strong, hanging in the air like someone had just walked through the room. The second thing was my bed, slightly rumpled even though I'd been gone for days. My makeup drawer was open. My laundry basket was lighter. I called Mila. No answer. Trying to reassure myself, I checked the guest room. The bed was untouched, the pillows perfectly placed. Mila had never slept there. Anxiety crawled up my spine, cold and sharp. I went back to my bedroom and started checking everything more carefully. My art tablet was missing, replaced with a cheap imitation. My laptop was smudged with fingerprints that didn't look like mine. A drawer I kept locked had been opened. The letters inside, old things from a relationship I barely talked about, slit neatly at the top. My breath felt shallow. Had I been this careless? Had someone else broken in? Then I saw the sliding door of my closet open just an inch. I walked over, palms sweating, and pulled it open. Shoes, coats, enough space behind the hanging jackets for someone to crouch. Nothing inside now. But something had been here. I felt it. I turned to check the rest of the hallway. And that's when I noticed something wedged behind my winter coats. A duffel bag that wasn't mine. Inside were belongings I didn't even know were missing: my childhood pendant, my old diary full of things I'd never told anyone, even my birth certificate. At the bottom lay a USB drive labeled Lena. My hands shook as I plugged it into my laptop. Hundreds of photos appeared. All of me. Sleeping, showering behind fogged glass, changing clothes, working on the couch, eating cereal in the morning. Taken from angles only someone inside my home could reach. Some were so close I could see the pores on my skin. The folder dates went back months. Mila had been here. Not as a guest, not as a friend, as something else. I tried calling her again. Straight to voicemail. By the time I reached the living room, my lungs felt tight, my vision sharp around the edges. I paced, dialing her again and again, until finally she picked up. "Lena?" she said, her tone wary. "I found your bag," I whispered, words trembling. "The photos. My things. What did you do?" A long silence. Then, "I was trying to keep you safe." Safe. The word hit me like a slap. "You were living in my house," I said. "You took pictures of me sleeping." "You don't understand," she insisted. "People hurt you. Everyone leaves you. I wasn't going to. I was watching over you." "That's not watching," I said. "That's breaking into my life." Her breathing sped up. "I had nowhere to go. You said I could stay anytime. Not like this." The silence stretched, brittle and dangerous. "Finally," she said, "you were better when I was there. You didn't even know." And then she hung up. That night, every sound in the house made me jump. The creak of the floorboards, the hum of the heater. Each shift in the dark felt like breath on my neck. I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch with every light on until morning. The next day, I changed the locks and installed cameras in every hallway. I blocked her number, reported the break-in. Though the police couldn't do much without proof, she still posed a threat. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. People don't let go of obsessions easily, especially not when they think those obsessions are love. Months passed. Slowly, the fear dulled around the edges, like a bruise fading. I tried to build new routines: work, yoga classes, weekend art markets. I told myself I was healing, but sometimes, late at night, I still caught myself staring at the hallway shadows, waiting for something to move. One warm afternoon in July, while walking through Pike Place Market, I spotted her. Mila stood at a fruit stand, hair cut shorter, shoulders tense like she expected the world to be watching. For a moment, she looked like the girl I used to know, the one who laughed too loud and drew restless, beautiful lines. Then her eyes met mine. Everything in her face went blank. She turned and slipped into the crowd, disappearing so quickly it felt impossible. My heartbeat didn't slow until I got back to the parking garage. When I reached my car, I froze. A small white envelope sat under the windshield wiper. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single photograph, grainy, taken at night, of me asleep in my bed, dated 4 nights ago. I had changed the locks, installed cameras, rerouted my whole life around safety, and still, Mila slipped through the cracks like smoke. I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, gripping the steering wheel, trying to convince myself to breathe. The photo felt radioactive in my pocket. When I finally drove home, I checked every camera feed twice. Everything looked untouched. The doors were still locked, the windows sealed. But fear isn't logical, it's instinctive, heavy, something that crawls into your ribs and makes a nest. That night, I slept in the living room with the lights on again. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, I woke to a soft creak near the hallway. My breath stopped. My cat lifted her head, ears sharp. She stared at the corner of the room, eyes wide, body low. I didn't hear anything else. Not a footstep, not a whisper, but I felt something. Like a presence brushing the edges of the air. I stayed awake until sunrise, clutching a kitchen knife I barely remembered grabbing. Eventually, I sold the townhouse, moved to another neighborhood. New locks, new security system, new everything. None of it erased what happened, but distance made it easier to breathe. I haven't seen Mila since. Not in person, not in photos, not even in the background of strangers' social media. Sometimes I imagine she vanished completely, like a shadow fading when the light shifts. Other nights, I wake up certain someone is standing just outside my bedroom door, not breaking in, just watching. The truth is, safety isn't something you can install or lock. It's something you build inside yourself, little by little. Even after someone has taken pieces of it, even the people you trust the most can cross lines you never imagined. So protect your boundaries and pay attention when something feels wrong. Your instincts might save you long before anyone else can. I used to think moving to a new city would fix everything. That's what people always say, change your environment, change your life. I believed it enough to sign a lease on a loft overlooking Lake Champlain in Burlington, Vermont. The place looked peaceful from outside, with old brick walls and giant windows, but inside it felt too quiet, like a breath held for too long. Still, it was better than staying home, where my parents fought every night and my brother walked around like I didn't exist. The loft became a sort of escape hatch. I didn't expect it to feel like a hollow shell, but I preferred emptiness over chaos. For a while it worked. I went to classes, picked up a part-time job, pretended I was becoming a new person. Then the old feelings came back, the strange awareness at night, like someone else was in the room. The sensation reminded me of the sleep paralysis episodes I used to get as a teenager. Back then, every episode came with the same hallucination. A tall man wearing something red around his neck. Even when I couldn't move a muscle, I could always see him, standing at the corner of the room, waiting for me to wake up. Caleb, my best friend, always brushed it off. He's the guy who believes every problem has a simple explanation. Your brain's just fried from stress, he'd say. You're not being haunted. He made me laugh when I needed it, even if I didn't believe him. The night of my 22nd birthday was supposed to be simple, just a few people hanging out before winter break. That's all I wanted, nothing dramatic. But a storm had rolled in from the lake earlier that evening, the kind that rattles the windows and turns the power lines into twitching shadows. Lightning flashed non-stop, and every time thunder hit, the loft shuddered like it had a pulse. Caleb stood near the balcony door, fighting with the half-broken lock. This place is one documentary away from being labeled a crime scene, he joked. I tried to laugh, but something about the wind pressing against the house made me feel like the walls were listening. We were setting up snacks and cheap beer when I noticed the muddy footprints, small, uneven, leading toward the attic ladder. They weren't deep enough for boots, not wide enough for sneakers, more like smudges from a worn shoe or a bare heel. The mud looked fresh, still darker than the floor. It didn't make sense. I hadn't been outside since the morning, and the rain had washed everything clean by then. Caleb, I said. Someone walked through here. He crouched down, looked at the prints, and shrugged. Probably from the balcony door. Mud blows in during storms. It hasn't blown mud inside before. You're spiraling, he said gently, but I couldn't shake it. The footprints moved in a straight line, slow and deliberate, as if someone had been wandering around the loft while I slept or showered or cooked breakfast. I tried to let it go, but the uneasiness clung to me. A little after midnight, our friends arrived, Mara, Mason, Quinn, and Lucy. They were the kind of people who made noise just by existing. Their laughter filled the room, and for a moment, the loft felt warmer. We lit candles around the living room because the lights kept flickering, and Mara joked that we were about to hold a seance. No one realized how close she was to the truth. About an hour into the gathering, Mara walked out of the hallway looking pale. She pointed toward the stairs and said, who's the guy upstairs? The room fell silent. Caleb said, "There's no guy upstairs." She shook her head. "I swear I saw someone, tall dude, standing on the landing. He had something red around his neck." My chest tightened. Her description matched mine exactly, down to the red. She wasn't drunk enough to imagine things. She wasn't the type to scare easily, either. Everyone tried to write it off as a reflection or a shadow, but Mara wasn't convinced. She kept glancing at the stairs, and every time she did, my skin prickled. The night went on, but something had shifted. Even with music playing, the house felt too quiet under the noise, like a hum just below hearing. The hallway looked darker than usual, the kind of dark that seemed to pull your eyes in. Twice, I thought I saw movement, not a full silhouette, just the suggestion of someone shifting their weight. By 2 in the morning, most of our friends had fallen asleep on the couches. The storm hadn't let up, and the thunder blended with the sound of the old wooden beams creaking above us. Caleb and I sat in the kitchen drinking the last of the warm beer because everything in the fridge was half frozen from a power flicker. He nudged me. "You okay?" I stared at the hallway. "I think someone's been in this house," I said quietly. "Before tonight." Caleb opened his mouth to brush it off like usual, but then something else spoke first. A low, raspy chuckle came from the stairwell. We both froze. The sound didn't belong to anyone sleeping in the living room. It didn't belong to anyone young. It sounded like someone who had been smoking for 40 years and had half a lung left. Caleb stood slowly. "Tell me that was one of them," he whispered. Before I could answer, the lights flickered again, and a shadow appeared at the end of the hallway. Tall, upright, completely still. A strip of red hung from its neck. Caleb whispered. Mara wasn't lying. The figure didn't move for several seconds. Then, almost casually, it tilted its head to the side, the way someone does when they're studying you. The gesture felt familiar, too familiar. Caleb pulled out his phone with shaking hands. I grabbed the nearest knife, a kitchen one that wasn't even sharp enough to slice a tomato cleanly, but it felt better than nothing. The figure stepped forward, not fast, not threatening, just walking, like he belonged there. As he passed under the dim light, I saw the scarf clearly. Red, damp, torn at one end. His boots left faint smudges of mud on the floor with every step. He didn't look at me. Or at Caleb. Not once. He walked straight to the front door, turned the handle, opened it, and stepped out into the storm. The wind whipped inside for a second before the door slammed shut. A moment later, we heard the lock click, not from the inside, but as if someone had locked it from the other side. Caleb just stared at the door, mouth open. When the police arrived, they searched everything. They didn't find anyone, but they did find a trail of blood droplets near the attic ladder, small, faded spots that led down the hallway and stopped right where the man had stood. One officer suggested it was from a guest who cut themselves, but none of our friends wore boots. None had a red scarf, none were tall, and none had muddy feet or blood on their clothes. By the time the sun rose, the house felt drained of something I couldn't name. Everyone left quickly, too embarrassed or too shaken to talk about what happened. Only Caleb stayed. We sat on the kitchen floor with the lights on, because neither of us wanted even a shadow in the room. After a while, I finally said it. "Caleb, I've seen him before." He didn't roll his eyes this time. "When?" "Since I was a kid. During sleep paralysis. He always wore red." He exhaled slowly. "Man, then he didn't just show up tonight." He looked toward the hallway with the kind of fear you only see on someone who finally believes you. "He's been with you for a long time," he said. "He followed you here." I didn't answer. I was thinking about the muddy prints I'd found my first week in the loft. The ones I convinced myself were from me or maintenance or the wind, but they had looked exactly like the ones from last night. Same shape, same direction, same slow spacing, like someone walking quietly. The realization hit hard and cold. He hadn't broken in. He'd already been inside. Long before the birthday, long before my friends saw him. Sometimes I wonder if he was real, or just the shape my mind gave to every unresolved part of my past. Fear, trauma, loneliness. Maybe he was something more literal. Maybe he was a person who found a way into the attic before I ever moved in. I'll never know for sure. But I know this. Running doesn't erase anything. The past doesn't stay behind just because you change your address. You can repaint the walls, replace the locks, fill a room with people, but if you don't face what scares you, it follows you in one form or another. I'm not sure whether the man in red is gone or just waiting for another quiet night, but now, I keep every light on. I check the floorboards, I check the attic, I check the balcony door. I don't pretend everything's fine, because something followed me here, and the scariest part is how long it took me to notice. You can escape a place, but not the fears you refuse to confront. Healing only begins when you face what haunts you, rather than waiting for it to appear in the dark. I never meant to return to small-town Oregon, but after years of freelancing in Portland deadlines, caffeine shakes, anxiety that made my chest feel too small, my wife Lena convinced me we needed a quieter place, a home that didn't share walls with anyone, somewhere I could breathe again. So in October 2018, we moved into a modest house on 12 Windsor Lane, a cul-de-sac, buried between tall pines on the outskirts of Blackwood Hills. The street was quiet enough to hear your own footsteps. It felt like a place where nothing terrible could happen, and my oldest friend lived right next door. I'd known Mark Rowan since we were 7. We'd grown up building forts, climbing trees, getting into trouble, and growing out of most of it together. He married Claire in his 20s. They had a son, Lucas, who was 14 when Lena and I moved in. Being near them felt like trying on my old life and realizing it still fit, but I was carrying something I didn't talk about. My younger sister Hannah vanished during a hiking trip years before. I was supposed to be watching her. One moment she was beside me, the next she was gone. Search teams combed the trails for days. Nothing. The guilt etched itself into me permanently. Losing her taught me to worry like it was a reflex. It also made me loyal sometimes to my own detriment. Mark was the one person who knew how much that loss hollowed me out. He didn't push, didn't ask. He just let me exist without judgment. For that first year on Windsor Lane, life felt almost normal. Mark and I slipped back into our old rhythm motorcycle, tinkering in the garage, brewing home batches of beer, grilling on weekends. Lucas often wandered over and watched me sketch while I worked. He had that open, eager energy teenagers have when they still believe adults know all the answers. We camped together, had joint dinners. Mark's laugh filled the yard like it used to. I thought we were building a life that might finally feel solid again. Then Lucas disappeared. It was March 2019, a weekend school retreat. Mark called me late that evening. He didn't get back on the bus, he said, his voice too calm. The kind of calm that rattles you because you know it's about to break. Search teams mobilized immediately. Volunteers combed the woods. The local news showed Lucas's picture hourly. Neighbors taped flyers to mailboxes. Claire stopped speaking to almost everyone. Mark lost weight and patience and something else you can't name. He shut down. He didn't return my messages. He avoided eye contact. He was grieving in a way that felt sharper, more defensive, like he was bracing against some invisible force. I gave them space. Maybe too much. My own trauma made me cautious. I didn't want to assume things. Didn't want to poke at wounds that weren't mine. Weeks passed, then months. Lucas's case went cold despite the community's efforts. Windsor Lane moved forward in the polite, awkward way towns do when life insists on continuing. Kids still biked past. Barbecues happened. Porch lights flickered on each night, but the Rowan house changed. Mark became isolated. Claire rarely came outside. Occasionally I caught the faint smell of chemicals drifting from Mark's garage cleaner. Bleach. Something sharp, but I pushed the thought away. I told myself I was projecting, that losing Hannah had rewired me too much to trust my instincts. Then, in June 2023, everything shifted. It was around 7:40 p.m. when Mark knocked on my door. I hadn't seen him up close in weeks. He looked rougher, sunken eyes, trembling hands, the restless twitch of someone who hadn't slept enough to remember how. He asked if he could borrow my father's old shovel. That shovel meant more to me than almost anything I owned. Iron-handled, heavy, a relic my dad used on every project when I was a kid. Mark knew that. Still, I handed it to him. "You working on something?" I asked. His response came too fast. "I don't need help. Just don't come over tonight." He forced a smile, but the fear beneath it wasn't subtle. After he left, curiosity gnawed at me. Later, when I sat at my desk sketching, I glanced out the window. Mark was digging behind his shed. Not garden work, this was deeper, faster, frantic. He kept checking his phone. He moved his SUV to the street, like he didn't want tires near the yard. Something cold moved through me. Old memories of search parties and dirt and silence. I watched until nearly midnight. Mark lifted something wrapped in a black contractor bag and lowered it into the hole. He worked with the urgency of someone burying more than yard waste. At 1:17 a.m., I did something stupid, or brave, or both. I slipped through the hedge into his yard. The moon was bright enough to sketch shadows on the grass. The hole was half filled, and poking from the dirt was the corner of that black bag. I crouched low, heart hammering, and leaned closer. Behind me, Gravel shifted. I didn't look. I ran. Through the hedge, across my yard, into my house, slamming the back door as quietly as panic allowed. I sat in the dark, adrenaline shaking through me. The next morning, the ground behind Mark's shed looked untouched, smooth, packed. The shovel sat polished on his porch, like someone had scrubbed the metal clean. Mark didn't wave, didn't speak, didn't even look at me. But that night, when I closed my curtains, he stood across the street watching my window. No expression, no movement, just watching. Then he turned and walked into the dark. I kept everything from Lena. I didn't want to drag her into something I couldn't explain. Didn't want her to look at me like I was paranoid again. But the scratching started, every night around midnight. Slow, deliberate scraping near the hedge. Too steady to be an animal, too rhythmic to be random. I never caught anyone, but the sound made my skin crawl. My anxiety surged. I barely slept. I watched the yard like it was a cliff edge. Finally, Lena cornered me one afternoon. She said I was distant, jumpy, distracted. I felt myself crack. I told her everything in one long, jumbled breath. She listened quietly. Then she said the sentence I was too scared to think. "We need to call the sheriff." We drove to the station. The deputy took my statement seriously but cautiously. Without proof, all he could do was a welfare check. They went to Mark's house the next afternoon. From my window, I saw him open the door. He looked calm. Too calm. He told them he'd been digging a drainage trench. Said he'd filled it in the next morning. They checked but couldn't dig without a warrant. Mark watched the deputies leave, his jaw clenched tight. But a week later, they returned with a warrant. I stood inside my house while detectives combed through Mark's property. They dug near the shed. 10 minutes passed. Then 20, and then they found it. Pieces of the contractor bag, scraps of a hoodie Lucas had worn the day he vanished. Mark screamed from the yard as they handcuffed him. Claire collapsed onto the grass, sobbing. In his garage they found bleach jugs, tarps, gloves. Not proof of murder, but enough to suggest he'd hidden something. During questioning, he broke apart in a way that didn't make sense. He denied hurting Lucas. He claimed he'd found something in the woods and panicked. He switched stories repeatedly. Runaway, accident, conspiracy, nothing clear. The trial came that fall. Lena sat beside me in the back row. Watching Mark sit at the defense table, I didn't see the boy I'd grown up with or the man who'd fixed my motorcycle 100 times. I saw someone hollowed out by grief, and something darker, something he never let us see. He wasn't convicted of murder, they couldn't prove it, but he was convicted of unlawful disposal of remains, tampering with evidence, and obstruction, enough to send him away for years. After sentencing, Claire packed a single suitcase and left town. She didn't say goodbye. The neighborhood changed after that. People looked over their shoulders more. Kids played closer to home. Porch lights stayed on later. Some neighbors thanked me quietly. Others avoided me, as if proximity to the truth made them uncomfortable. The scratching in my yard stopped, but even now, sometimes at night, I swear I hear it again, a faint scrape near the hedge, like something buried beneath years of silence is still trying to claw its way back up. Maybe it's just my imagination, or maybe it's a reminder. The lesson I learned, the one I'll never forget, is that silence can be its own kind of violence. When something feels wrong, ignoring it doesn't protect anyone. It just gives the darkness more time. You don't have to be brave loudly. You just have to speak before the night gets too deep, because secrets don't stay buried, not forever.